Right. So first of all, I'm really excited that our steering committee work has started. We introduced these people to you last time with just name, and today we want to create a bit more space for you to get to know them. Very happy to announce that the team has elected Kirstie as the chair of the steering committee, Arielle Bennett as secretary of the steering committee. We also have Batool Almarzouq as chair-elect and Jem as secretary-elect. And we're very excited to have this leadership established. So that's that's a piece of work that I'm really proud of being able to do as part of this community. And now we're going to really see committee-led governance. You'll get to know them. Unfortunately, Arielle is not here today because of the health-related break she needed to take. But hopefully you can reach out to her and pass your wishes. I also want to thank Janina Bellini-Saibene for supporting this voting process as an external member and not as an active part of the steering committee. She could hold these voting so people could cast their vote anonymously. So thank you, Janina. If you don't know Yani, please do check out her work. She is an amazing community leader working with our OpenSci and Our Ladies Leadership. Another thing that I want to announce, we have officially, as of today, launched the Fireside Chat series on governance. I'm very delighted to partner with Software Sustainability Institute, particularly working with Oscar, who's also on the call, to launch this. So we have planned monthly Fireside Chat on governance to talk about governance from different aspects. The reason for that was that we saw that there are a lot of people who are interested in governance, and we didn't want to secure that conversation only for the steering committee members. So monthly, every last Thursday, you will have the chance to hear from different people. You can go to the start page, and we have already opened the registration. And today, our Fireside Chat with the steering committee officially begins that. We haven't planned for break, so I want to let you know if you ever have to take a break, you can take a break. For the next 45 minutes, we will be running discussions and question and answer with this committee members. I will stop sharing my screen and you'll see them on Zoom or hear them on Zoom. But if you have to take a break, please do. And we hope to save enough time for you to ask direct questions, things that we're not able to cover. So today's purpose is for you to understand where these members are coming from and what they're bringing as part of the steering committee. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and give you a chance to just welcome our steering committee member. I'll not spotlight them because we are as many people as steering committee members, so you can see them. So we have today Kirstie Whitaker, who's now officially chair of our steering committee. She's joining us from California. We have Batool Almarzouq, our officially elected chair-elect, who's joining from Liverpool. Léllé Demertzi joining from her home in London. We have Liz Hare, who's also joining from the US, New York. Madge joining from the UK. And Steele, also London. And it's me. So we have prepared some questions, and I want to go in somewhat similar order of Kirstie, Batool, Jem, Léllé, Liz, and hear from them who they are and what do they think, what part of governance that they want to talk about today. They all have prepared very kindly notes that you can already see, but this is your chance to verbalize them.
You want me to get us started? We'll get going. Okay, so our first question was to think about our positionality as an individual with an interest in the Turing Way's governance. And we were strongly encouraged to write down our answers so that we didn't ramble and use up all of the time. So I'm Kirstie Whitaker. I founded the Turing Way in 2018 as part of the AI for Science and Government funding at the Turing Institute. And the prompt then was to come up with an idea that wasn't traditionally or commonly funded. So it was specifically to try and find something that was unusual and sort of not just could be funded by lots of people all the time. B, could start quickly. That was a sort of logistical constraint. And C, could show impact in 6 months. Also a tough one for a scientific project. But working openly and having an incredible network that I was able to sort of reach out to meant we hit all of those needs. And I think over those 5 years, 6 years, we've moved the needle on making projects like these more likely to be funded, which is so exciting. On the steering committee, I represent the Jupiter Hub DEI funding that was awarded as part of the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative's Essential Open Source Software for Science program. And our goal in that delivery group is to both support the Jupiter Hub team to be more inclusive, particularly focusing on inclusive leadership, and to capture those learnings in the Turing Way to allow other projects to benefit. So a way of not inventing how to lead an open source project, because Jupiter Hub knows how to do that, but a pathway to disseminating that knowledge. My vision for the Turing Way has been the same as it always has, been. And it's even more relevant in my new role as Executive Director for the Berkeley Institute for Data Science. And our mission there is to foster and facilitate open and collaborative research, which is exactly the same as what we've been doing for the last 6 years. So I'd consider an ideal success for the governance of the Turing Way to have as few decisions happen at the top, the constitutional level, as possible. There should really only be questions that are particularly thorny or complex that make it all the way up to that level. So what that looks like in practice is really empowering the working and delivery groups to know what is inside of their scope to be able to decide. Shall I throw to Batool? Let's do it, Batool.
Yeah, happy to follow up. I'll be very brief. So yeah, I am Batool Almarzouq. I've met actually many of you in different calls. If we haven't met before, I've joined the Turing Way back in November 2020 in one of the book dash. Currently leading the localization and translation working group, as I mentioned previously. One of the things, just thinking and reflecting about the Turing Way and how I joined myself, I think the Turing Way, again, is a community that inspired a lot of the work that I do in different open source or open science grassroots activity. And I take a lot from the practices, the processes, and build in them in different spaces. And I also sort of allow me sort of to reflect in some of these and some of my thoughts and reflection and bringing it back also to the community, which is something that I like. Probably one thing that I'll be focusing on within the steering committee is really allowing more of that sort of shared ownership and empowerment, especially within localization working group. As I mentioned, it's definitely a space that I felt in sort of belonging and wanted sort of to share and extend that experience to everyone, especially those people who English is not their first language and are trying to contribute to the open source community. Yeah, that's very much from me. Shall I pass it to Liz?
Am I next?
Yep.
Hi. I work in working dog genetics, health and behavior. I found the Turing Way because I am part of a big team science project called the Many Dogs Project, which is a way of linking together many labs around the world to do dog cognition research. And I was particularly interested in learning more about reproducibility and working on code with teams of people, because I was background academic and academic adjacent. So working together was really new, and I found all these great resources as part of the Turing Way book. And then I also found out that the Turing Way is an amazing community in addition to being a compendium of great resources for open science. And I found a community that was intentional and thoughtful about being welcoming, inclusive, and accessible to a lot of people, and that it was a place where I could work to produce more materials to educate the community about inclusion and accessibility. And I have been co-leading the accessibility working group with Anne over the last 2 or 3 years. We are interested in having some more participants in our group, which may mean raising funds so that we can bring in people with experience working in this area and also people who've actually experienced exclusion so that they can contribute to a guide on doing this sort of thing across communities. Yeah, I have joined the steering committee because I want to support this continuing to be a place where we can do this kind of work together.
Cool. Shall I go, Malvika? Yeah. Yeah, so well, I've already given an introduction earlier on, but I'll sort of give it again briefly. I'm Jim. I work as a research software engineer at the Engineering Institute, doing a lot of work on trusted research for the past few years. I'm very passionate about Linux and open source, and yeah, also into films and photography and cycling and knitting more recently. So uh, I think the position answer question was really interesting and something that's always been I've always liked about the Turing Way, unlike a lot of other sort of open source groups, being a sort of software engineer, sort of like technical infrastructure person here is actually slightly unusual and sort of those skills are valuable, but sort of not as common here as they might be in like a open source software project. And I think that influences, I think, what I like, what I'm interested in quite a bit. And sort of reflecting a bit on that role I sort of have on the steering committee in the infrastructure working group. I think unsurprisingly, we've got quite strong opinions on how things should be done, what a good process looks like, and uh, because we're all sort of quite technical people, lots of experience in infrastructure engineering and software engineering. We like best practice and we encourage it and we realize why it's important. But in the Turing Way, it's sort of interesting because you've got to not lose sight of who the community is, and the ultimate goal is always really enabling and empowering people to be able to contribute. So that's always been an interesting balance, and I always like to sort of take the attitude. It's a little bit about finding a compromise, but it's thinking about how does the structure, whether that's like rules or automation or processes, how do you make sure that that's always helping people contribute and not instead sort of making a barrier, making things feel unwelcome. So I think that's what I'm really interested in sort of following, exploring on the steering committee.
Hello, everyone. Hi, I am Léllé Demertzi, and I work as a research project manager for the Turing Way. I joined the project back in September 2024, and I had the joy to be part of two book dashes already in the planning committee. And since very recently, I am co-chairing the newly founded community management working group with Anne. And this is the working group that I am representing within the steering committee moving forward. I am also a member of the Practitioners Hub delivery group, where we work with Bridge AI and applying open ethical principles in data science for small and medium businesses. A little bit about my ideal in my involvement with the Turing Way Steering Committee and echoing so many things that Jim just said already. For me, it all goes down to inclusivity because I feel like we have so many community members from so many diverse backgrounds and expertise, and being a person that from a reader of the Turing Way, I have been mentored and empowered to take more initiative and accountability towards different aspects of the project. This is also something that I want to do and bring community members to maintenance level group members so that we can keep the Turing Way alive forward. Just a reminder that every contribution is meaningful, and I feel like the community management working group will be an excellent place to see this transition from the funded roles that were supported by the Turing Institute until now, and how we can reshape the processes for how the community convenes, collaborates, thinks together. Yeah, that's about it. And I will pass the word to my co-chair in the community management working group, Anne.
Thanks, Léllé. Hi, everyone. I'm Anne. I'm the research community manager of the Turing Way until the end of June. And I have been since March 2022. It's hard to believe that it's been 3 years with the community. I've been embedded with different working groups over the course of those 3 years, at some point supporting their beginnings, their incubation, like with the accessibility working group, the infrastructure working group, the book dash working group, and institutionalization as well, with the translation and localization group, which really preceded all of our governance structures more than 3 years ago. And we really looked towards as a kind of initial guiding light. My focus right now as a co-chair of the community management working group with Léllé is really to pass on this kind of vital operational, community knowledge to this group of community leaders across the project. And I have to say, it's been a total joy to witness them grow in their confidence in doing this kind of work. I had a conversation with a member just earlier today about how he didn't necessarily feel ownership over contributing to community management or like being a steward of the community. And I think overcoming the barriers of the kind of, what do we call it? Imposter syndrome that we all face in different periods. It's amazing how that imposter syndrome never really fades away. So I'm really excited for this kind of working group to be embedded across the community, to be able to be that kind of connecting mycelium, that it breaks down informational silos, that enables people to feel welcome, that keeps that kind of vital operational everyday work. I believe that Danny actually, in a different talk given many years ago, talked about the need to keep, the door handles shined and the floors swept and, the rooms clean. And I think this is very much the work of the community management working group. To answer the question around what we're doing together with the steering committee, if there's anything that I've learned from...
Sorry, and that's the next question.
Oh, the next one. Okay, cool. I passed it on.
I'll bring you there.
Amazing.
Well, thank you so much. I would also share mine. I have remained in the steering committee first as a DSWB liaison, but I think there would be a lot of work that I will do beyond the Turing Way, Turing Institute, that would be building in conjunction with the Turing Way. And I definitely think that we created the Turing Way to become a place that we thought we needed. And in the last 5-6 years, we've really worked on getting the community going and getting people to find their places where they can contribute. Joining Kirstie, I think Kirstie's this very famous quote, like, that could be a chapter in the Turing Way, or you have a skill and that's a special sauce. I think those are simple things, but at the end, like that's been our work to make sure that everybody who joins the Turing Way feels empowered. And also having people like Anne and Léllé, but also a lot of you actually have worked in different working groups to empower the people where Kirstie and I had no role. And I think this is really entering into a new world of open source project, becoming open source project with the community. So that's definitely my personal positionality as a person who didn't have enough people who were thinking about equity long, like 10 years, 15 years ago. And I think looking at the Turing Way, I think we are in a very good place and I'm very excited for this new chapter. So now we're entering the second question. That question was, what are we trying to achieve as a steering committee over the next month? Because Anne, you started to speak about it, I'll let you continue on.
Oh man. Sorry, so if there's anything that I've learned from 3 years of being a part of this like governance work within the community and really learning a lot from everyone in this space, it's that structure is really important for not enabling that kind of tyranny of structurelessness. And so it's been amazing to see through Malvika this kind of stewardship of the formalization of our kind of work together, to see the way in which the community calls have emerged, the steering committee has emerged, and hopefully these structures will enable, that we're setting up throughout this year will be things that we can carry on far into the future. I'd say from the community management working group perspective, like I was saying in my introduction, I'm really keen for them to operate as kind of like mycelium across the community, embedded through their own interests and their own skills and their own expertise, kind of connecting across the emerging projects and different silos and specialties and types of work that's happening.
Thank you. And Liz, you have response to that.
Yes, I think this is a really important transition period from having financial support and wonderful support from Anne and Léllé to kind of facilitate our entry into these structures and collaboration with these structures. And I think the work that Anne has just talked about that's being done to make these structures more overt will really help people to enter and contribute and know how they can contribute. And I think that's really terrific. I think the next, few months to a year are really important for us to firm up some of our government's documents and ways of working together, and also to look ahead to other maybe new kinds of funding support so that some of these great people who have been volunteering or who might not really have the ability to contribute without being paid can come along as well.
We have some time on this question. Are there other steering committee member who would like to respond to this? What are we doing over the next month in the committee?
I'll unmute and represent Arielle, who's not here today, but there has been a giant amount of work around documentation over the last, well, as Anne said, multiple years, but certainly in the last sort of 6 months, 9 months, something like that. And so one of the other sort of responsibilities of what we're working on now is to make sure that we've all read and agree on the documentation, make sure that it's all coherent with each other, and then, rely on that documentation to allow others to see how decisions are made. So I just wanted to sort of shout out all of that work and making sure that we're actually sort of following it, because that's going to be one of our strongest pathways to democratizing ownership and leadership in the Turing Way.
While you're on it, Kirstie, I'll pose the second question to you. What do you hope we will do in the next 5 years as a result of the governance work we're doing now?
Okay, Mackenzie, just quiet for just a moment. Okay, Mackenzie is quoting Mulan because that's one of her favorite movies. So thank you for this question. I wrote down some notes, which is really good now that I'm multitasking with my daughter. Okay, so I hope that in 5 years' time, we're going to have a problem of too many delivery groups, meaning that we can't give every single one of them a role on the steering committee. And also that there are contested elections for all of the working groups. Sorry, my friends are right here. They're right here. I just switched to another tab so that I could read my notes. So what that would mean if there were contested elections for all of the working groups is that there's lots of people who are members. Okay, you go get your Encanto people. It's particularly hard when I'm talking. This is the challenging part. So if there were contested elections in the working groups, that would demonstrate that there were quite a lot of members in the working group and that the working groups were delivering something of value to the members. So not just that the working groups are doing something good for the Turing Way, which they are and always have been, but actually that there were so many people who were like, by being a member of this working group, I am gaining some benefit, not just being an altruistic sort of kind human being, but there's a career benefit, or there's a sort of connections benefit, whatever that looks like, a knowledge benefit that comes from being a member. And so if the working groups are really strong, that will be a great success in 5 years' time. And if we have too many delivery groups, remembering that the distinction between a working group and a delivery group is that a delivery group has external commitments. So often that means that there is external funding that they have to kind of report against.
if we have too many delivery groups, quote unquote, too many delivery groups, that means we have successfully brought a lot of people in who are being paid to do the work for the Turing Way. So those would be those would be like the indicators in 5 years' time that we have really sort of successfully made this transition to a strong and powerful community.
Jim, you have a response to that.
Yeah. Yes. Same question at the 5 years. Yeah. Yeah. So I think the thing that I initially thought of, and then I thought a bit more about what it really meant, I think, was I'd really like the Turing Way to be a sustainable community run, maybe community owned is a better way of expressing that project. And so I think what that really needs for it to work is a sort of very strong, quite close and dedicated core team who may or may not be volunteers, but I suppose possibly at least have to sort of be willing to be volunteers. And I think that part of it we've already got a lot of. I think we do have a really strong community. And I think maybe the sort of gap is to have the kind of structure, which I think it's documentation, but it's also a bit of infrastructure, as in where do we talk? What are the processes? What are the sort of common tools we use? To have those things in place in a way which enable people and make it welcoming to get involved. So I want to really lower that barrier. We don't want it to be the situation where getting involved and becoming a maintainer of the Turing Way means you need to sort of force your way in, or you need to put in a lot of effort, or put up with barriers, or feeling unwelcome. And so I feel like that's the sort of change I'd like to see. And I think there can be quite a lot of do you want to say like top down sort of things from the steering committee to say, look, we need to do things in a sort of proper, organized, inclusive way, and here's why a bit of formality actually helps. And so then I thought a bit more about like what this actually means, like why do I like this idea that we're sort of independent, we're sort of community owned, community run. And I think there's sort of two like prongs to that. And I sort of like the idea that we can have our cake and eat it, because if we're independent and if we're community run, that means we've got the freedom to sort of set our own direction. We can focus on what we want and what we think is important. We can have our transparent governance and sort of follow our community values, and that will help bring people in and sort of encourage people to work with us, and we'll be in a place where we're sort of self-sufficient, so we can continue to run without the need for huge amounts of funding. We just need enough to keep the lights on, and I think we can find that. But also, I think the sort of have your cake and eat it part is because we're not so sort of strictly tied to a particular institute as we have been in the past. Hopefully, that makes us seem more welcoming. I suppose what I mean is, I hope it would sort of encourage more people to get involved, that they see us as this is a group we can collaborate with. They sort of offer something which is useful for us or our people, so we can contribute to that, rather than seeing us as, well, this is a project that belongs to this other organization. So, why are we the people to get involved with that? Isn't that sort of someone else, something that someone else owns? So I'm hoping that we can sort of have both in a way that we're sort of sustainable. We don't really need other organizations, but actually at the same time, other organizations are more willing to want to interact with us. So that's my dream.
Thank you, Jim. Léllé, over to you. Are you responding to this question?
Am I not responding to the next question?
You can, whichever you choose. Okay, then we move to the next question then. Léllé, reflecting on your own experience, what would you say is the route to becoming involved in decision-making in the Turing Way?
Yes. So as a project manager, I pay a lot of attention to documentation, as previously said, and the work we have seen that we are doing as part of the onboarding of the community management working group is exactly finding the gaps in the documentation and responding to all these silly questions, which are not silly at all, because it helps us also redefine how we do everything that we do, not in a way that speaks of, oh, this is how it's been done for the past 4 or 5 years. Also with some institutional restraints on how things were done or which platforms we were using. So now we have the ability to shape the new processes based on the documentation that we have from all the previous ones, the templates, the schedules and timelines of different activities. We are also distributing roles amongst the different members of the community management working group, helping them try to start making decisions within their own remit in the first place, but also feel this sense of shared agency that their decisions are actually having a real impact to the community as well. Another thing that I would like to add there, and this was something that was very helpful for me as I started taking more initiative within the Turing Way, was the community handbook and reading everything that there is about the community organizing, which was super helpful, and also the pathways to navigate the handbook, which we create for all different profiles of research infrastructure roles, including data stewards, data managers, data scientists, community managers, project managers, delivery groups like the data science without borders that was mentioned earlier. So I feel like these are the places for someone that is part of the community that they can start very easily understanding a little bit of the bips and blobs behind the Turing Way machine. Another thing that I would like also to mention is that there are so many ways to contribute and become part of the community. If there is a more time-bound engagement, someone could apply to join the planning committee of the book test. And this is sort of a 5 to 6 month commitment with a very tangible output, like the week-long book test event. And then they can start seeing what are the underpinnings of the efforts of these public-facing activities, or they could join the community management working group and find ways to contribute either by monitoring the Slack channels or writing newsletter or anything that incentivizes them to develop further in their own professional development as well. I think I've hit all my talking points.
Thank you, Léllé. Also, just for other folks to know, Léllé has confided in me, which I'm telling everyone, there's Léllé pre-collaboration workshop and there's Léllé post-collaboration workshop. She feels so involved now that I'm really excited that she's in a steering committee too. Right, Batool, you have been with us for a very, very long time and you have a lot to say about this question.
Not as much as what Léllé sort of mentioned. She pretty much mentioned so many points I wanted to mention already. But probably one thing that I can flag is, again, each working group has that sort of autonomy in the way that they govern actually sort of their work in a group. We in the localization, again, we have that joy of working with the most diverse members of the community, each speak their own language, and even have very different model and understanding and what inclusivity, transparency, accessibility, governance, and open source actually mean. And just thinking back on how the localization working group started, we started, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, even before the structure of the current working group sort of took place, or even the delivery group sort of taken place. And we have always sort of been reflecting and trying to review how our structure sort of work, how we can allow that sort of more sense of shared ownership. Again, I'm always reflecting how we rotate leadership within the working group itself, what pathway leads to people sort of progressing within the localization, because a lot of these people who translate and do a lot of the work, they actually do it behind the scene. You don't see them in GitHub. They do it mostly in Karoune, and then Karoune would export their name and comes up in GitHub. But like, you don't see them, you don't interact with them inside GitHub itself. I think, again, I think everyone in this call shared that sentiment that we want a place where people, again, are welcomed, being able to understand the process, feel able to challenge also when they need to challenge any of the things going on. That's pretty much what I wanted to say, and the top of what Léllé sort of mentioned.
Thanks, Batool. I'll add to that. I think this is going to be the documentation that we are reviewing. Who can join the steering committee? You know, how these people join the steering committee is because people were involved in the community. They could join or create a working group, and these people are chairing the working group or have been elected by their working group to represent their working group's interests in steering committee. And that's the pathway that anybody can actually take. So these roles are not reserved for people like us who you've seen for a very long time. The reason we are here in steering committee is the simple fact is because we're still quite deeply involved in the projects and have written grants for an external project, or we had a project where our team members are handing over things to other people. So I want to really encourage you all to, you know, find the places that you really enjoy. You know, the working group that we really have is for the reason there were people who came together and said, this is a problem that we want to solve. And they liked working with each other and they continued working with each other. So we have really, like, from last few years, tried to document all of these processes for how decisions are made at the community level, how decisions are being made at the working group level, which working group people have solidified, and now we are solidifying at the steering committee. So I really want to encourage you all to not consider that steering committee groups are reserved for few people. It's for anybody who has the time and interest. I also want to just emphasize that being involved in the decision making of the Turing Way is exactly the same as being involved in the decision making of any good open science or open source project. It has to be very, very transparent in the way we work. It needs to go on the GitHub. It needs to go through some of the processes of public consensus, as in like your consensus. And these are the processes that steering committee for this year would be defining. So this is a very, very important time for our steering committee to push forward some of the things that we couldn't as part of an institution that was funded, and we had mandates and goals and deliveries. So I met Anne and Léllé yesterday. I'm like, isn't it exciting? We can do so many more creative stuff that nobody's asking us to not do anymore, right? Like here we have a chance to really make a difference in the way we work and really change as in improve things that work. We should keep doing things that don't work and hasn't worked in the past. We should fix it. So for me, the structure very similar to what Jim was saying and what Batool was saying, building belonging through transparency, infrastructure, we are accountable people, and we would create spaces in the community forum for us to share with you what's happening. And we want to make sure that people who are not here, actually, I know every single person except for a few. I would love to see this room with a lot of people that I don't know, that they are interested in the work that we're doing. And if that is a structure that's missing, that's the structure we need to build. So yeah, so that's like our main questions. We're gonna close the fireside chat and then open the room for discussion with all other lovely people I'm seeing here. So the closing is, what is your one thing you'd like to do as part of the committee that you feel proud of? There are many things we all want to do. We all wear multiple hats. So here I'm asking one thing that you would like to do. And no pressure, but it's recorded and it's going to be on YouTube, and we'll find you if you don't do it. No, I wouldn't. So one thing, and I'm going to start with you, Liz. Should I go with someone else first? Yeah, let's go with Jim. I'm just looking at my screen to go with from right or left. So I'm going to go with Jim on my left.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I think sometimes I'm sort of I get an idea and I'm sort of only able to think about, or everything I think about is somehow influenced by that. It's so something like the last idea I've had is usually the idea I've got. And so the last idea I had was, I think we'd really benefit from a sort of, I think another project you'd call it like a triage team. So people who see themselves as maintainers, so doing a lot of the work which I think possibly before was sort of done by the community management team. But I think going forward, especially if they have sort of limited time, you really want to let them focus on the community building stuff and not on sort of more routine GitHub stuff. So I think the things I'm talking about are really like triaging issues, assigning labels, sorting things properly, saying actually this would be better as a discussion, or this would be better off in this repository rather than the book repository. And I think that kind of thing's important. I think it helps people contribute to the project. It makes the repo a lot easier to navigate. And I think my suspicion is it's going to get even more important when we don't have someone who's sort of being paid to work on the Turing Way, who you can say, you're the least bad person to do this. Can you please do this? When you don't have that kind of
Matchmaker
sort
almost.
of like authority to say, well, you're an employee and I'm telling you to do this. There needs to be a lot more enthusiasm for people to do that work. And I don't think it's the most glamorous work, but if we get a good team of people who care and want to do it, it also doesn't take a lot of effort, a few minutes per week. And if there's a team of people doing that, then everything will be really neat and tidy and look very professional and nice. So that's the thing. I would feel really happy if I could help sort that out.
Very tangible. Thanks, Jim. Batool. I'm very randomly picking. I'm sorry, I didn't put order for this. So Batool.
I don't have very unique answer. It's going to be pretty much similar to what everyone sort of mentioned. Again, I think we would benefit from redefining what autonomy and working group actually mean, while keeping the structure transparent with that sort of shared agency that everyone sort of mentioned. I think that will support sustainability. Sustainability doesn't always mean funding. It means what sort of, it means having these processes in place and people feeling that sort of shared agency and ownership. I would like to reflect more on these processes and become more enabler for the community, especially for people whose English is not their first language.
Thanks, Batool. Anne.
Maybe speaking from as I make the transition from a paid staff member as a research community manager to an unpaid community member, if there's one thing that I hope, it's that folks outside the space, folks within the space, feel that they can take on community-related tasks and that they felt welcome, trusted, empowered to lead in them. I think, as we've said all together over the course of this call, it's a very important, difficult, tricky, empowering, interesting, wonderful time for the community and the project. And so I'm very, if there's one person that says that, hopefully more than one person, then I'll view it as a success. And sorry, I didn't turn off my notifications before speaking and unmuting.
We did hear that.
Oh, amazing.
Léllé.
How to say something original at this point? Yes, I just find myself deeply invested and committed in maintaining a continuity of activities and engagement opportunities within the community. When I joined the Turing Way, it was already at the time of flux, but I really want to prove, probably mostly to myself, that a project can thrive without institutional support. We were not asking for their permission anyway, more like for their forgiveness. I'm not even sure if I'm supposed to say that in a recording. Maybe we can edit that part out. So maybe we take a little bit for granted how much intention there is to keep this community alive, because we know it's so much more than a project. I have seen during the same scientific alignment from an institute's perspective, other projects to fall off the map, team members that barely ever have contact with each other anymore. And I think we are a very unique case to keep this community alive and actually drive it with more freedom, also in terms of decision making, but also processes and how we engage with each other. Yeah, something along those lines.
So, Kirstie, I can ask you one thing. It seems like it's the right time to speak for you.
Do it real quick. So I would say partnerships with other open source projects. So have a sort of position the Turing Way as a sort of hub in a great ecosystem, rather than kind of have people think of the Turing Way as its own separate project. We will always be our own separate project, but we deliver on the mission much more effectively if it is done with and through other open source communities as well.
Thank you. Liz.
One of the things that I would like to be able to develop is a more stabilized membership in the accessibility working group, because I think actually the topic of accessibility kind of touches all of the other working groups and the groups that are organized around external funding, and I'm forgetting the term for that. But I'd like to be able to support people to participate in a group where, again, I'd love to be able to get back to creating content for the book, but I also would like to be able to support the whole community in creating events without barriers and stuff.
Thank you, Liz. I agree. I think accessibility conversation happens in every corner, and it's just people need to know that their accessibility considerations are being discussed in the working group too. I would add my one thing. I think mine is one is like, I think we are very capable of doing is to preserve the joy. I feel like, no matter how difficult the world feels, sometimes coming back to the Turing Way community calls just makes it feel all right that there are places we can still go to and have tough conversation without being judged. So I want to make sure that now that I would not be doing leadership, I can focus on joy and art and creativity and the elements of the Turing Way that has made Turing Way very unique, and I want to preserve that. And on the more kind of concrete side, I think I have told this to a lot of people. One of my dreams with the Turing Way maintainers group is to build fellowship programs, and a fellowship program where different maintainers are able to find funding to continue working in their own area. And of course, that would definitely build on the SSI Fellows Network model, because I think that has been very empowering for me and for a lot of you folks. So I feel like something like that would kind of address some questions we were talking about, how do we maintain people's time, and when now we wouldn't have full-time position, how do we continue to support and empower the community? We have a few more minutes now, and I would open the floor for questions, but you all know these people, we're all on Slack, so I'm very happy to have this conversation going on Slack. But for now, we do have some minutes. If you would like to ask any question, you're very welcome to tell us later to cut that part out from the video, but I won't stop the recording at the moment. Yeah, what questions folks have for our committee? Yes, Oscar.
Yeah, I thought I'll break the silence. Thank you very much. It was very interesting. So the hat that I've got on is our next Fireside Chat, which is going to be on governance, and where we'll talk with Neil, Simon, and Riva Quiolga about sort of governance models. There's a little promo for the next time as well. But I think what's really useful and would be really valuable for that is sort of see if we can summarize that first question, and see if the community or the steering committee or the people here can agree on it sounds awful, but like value statement. Because I think there were a lot of areas and a lot of topics that were sort of coming back into responses from the steering committee. And I think they overlap a lot with the community. And it would be a really strong, I think, starting point for discussion next week, or in a few weeks, to have that value statement. And then, from that, see, okay, these are the things that we really care about. These are the things that the Turing Way represents and we want it to represent. And this is why we want this governance model. This is why we want this kind of decision making, or this is why. So that first thing is, that we're really good. And I've made a very awkward draft of it, but it would be really good to sort of make a statement of that. And one element that I'm questioning when drafting that sort of value statement is a level of advocacy. Where do you see the Turing Way in actively promoting or changing the community, or making it sort of community driven and feeding things through? So how active do you want your hand to be in making changes, promoting the values that you have? Be interested to hear some responses to that.
Anyone wants to get? I think that's a question. I want to just, before we respond, are there more questions in the room? Because depending on that, we can decide how much time we're spending on this question, because it's a very deep question here. Right. Any responses on Oscar's question? I see Liz has written, so we do have a draft on guiding principle that she was reviewing, because that's one of the part of our reviewing process we're doing. And these guiding principles are, just a draft that needs to be improved, but we haven't written value statement or values per se. Kirstie?
Yeah, so I think it's a really great question, and it's a really great kind of provocation. There's an awful lot of there's a lot of content in our conversations, this one included, but there's loads and loads of conversations that is not super discoverable, and it's not super kind of boiled down. And the tension is that the person who writes the sort of the values and the vision and the purpose of the project sort of has an awful lot of power in setting that. And I think what we have at the moment in the Turing Way is a culture of really not wanting sort of a small group of people or one person to define that. It was always, the goal was always to kind of have this be a co-created project. But what I think comes up in your question, and I think it's something that we've been wrestling with in the steering committee, is actually it's helpful to be able to point to a clear mission. It's helpful to actually have all of these kind of things written down so that people can understand it and see how they fit in. So I think we just sort of collectively have to kind of wrestle with that tension a bit, and probably get something kind of out there, and then create a culture where people feel very comfortable editing it or suggesting changes, and sort of explicitly reviewing, let's say every year, for example, and checking in to see if it makes sense. Because I think that's the hard sort of line to walk across these things. And then I know I'm talking a lot, but on the question on advocacy, I think the answer is that we should have very high appetite for advocacy, because we think we should absolutely be looking to sort of say, here's what we've done. We don't do it perfectly, but here's some expertise that we have. Here's something that you too could do, you being a project anywhere across the sort of open research ecosystem. And yeah, I think we should be advocating, including at the policy level and for funders. And we've got a long history of doing that, but the scaling factor is having that not appear to be done from staff at the Turing Institutes. The scaling factor is have it be people who identify as members of the Turing Way community know that they are empowered and encouraged to go out and sort of see where they can make a change in the world.
I have also just a quick response to add to that. I think now that we don't have single institutional affiliation, it makes it easy for us to be much more fearless advocates in areas where we thought our words can be misjudged or we would be, we would lose our jobs. So I feel like advocacy perspective, we have always been big advocates, but now I think we have a lot more freedom. But I do agree that having a value statement also allows us to have those statements reflect with the community's value and not just everything. Just because this community doesn't have an affiliation or established legal surrounding or framework, I think a value statement or values guiding principle would really help for definitely that. But also the idea of the Fireside Chat is for us to learn from the communities of experts from outside different community before we start drafting something. And that's why I don't want to rush that timeline. So we can take into account how other people from the communities have drafted it. And I'm very excited to say we have really wonderful speakers who have agreed to be part of these Fireside Chats, and we plan to draft documents around that in November, book dash, and hopefully within that period, steering committee has also some time to review some documentation that we have and also assess what are we losing or gaining as a result of not being part of an institution anymore or having multiple institutions working. But that was an excellent question. I know we are on time. Thank you so much, steering committee members, for coming along and those who joined us to listen in. And also congratulations to our steering committee elected members. It's a really exciting time for us. And we'll see you all next time. Our committee forum would not be in August, it would be in September. But we have loads of Fireside Chats, so please join us there. And thank you, Oscar, for co-hosting that with us. See you all next time.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye all.
Thanks, everyone.